What is wrong with this guy? Some self-proclaimed Republican, Tim Miller, reduced this entire Piers Morgan panel to an insult contest, and Steven Crowder calmly pulled the house of cards of his entire argument. And the contention? It's from back when Joe Biden's garbage gaffe had sent the Democrats into a frenzy, and people like Tim Miller pulled every logical trick in the book to create a false equivalence with the violent rhetoric we've seen against Donald Trump. Just take a look for yourself before I tell you more about it.
I was just laughing listening to all that, Piers. Donald Trump's never called anybody garbage. Donald Trump called Kamala Harris's advisors garbage just like the other week. Donald Trump said America is a trash can and the world is sending their garbage, which is migrants here. Donald Trump's called me and other people that oppose him in the media the enemy of the people. He's called people human scum. He said that Haitian migrants were eating cats and dogs. Do we need to keep doing this? Like this? Like we're going to pretend to be offended on behalf of Donald Trump? I mean, and Steven Crowder, by the way, his whole career, this is why he's on Rumble, not on YouTube, because he got kicked off YouTube because all he does is insult gay people, insult trans people. The only garbage I know is Steven Crowder and Donald Trump. So they're garbage. I don't think all of Donald Trump's supporters are garbage. I think that many of them are good people that have been misinformed by Donald Trump and Steven Crowder's lies.
Well, just to set the record straight, Steven is still very much on YouTube with nearly 5 million more subscribers than Tim Miller's Bulwark podcast. But now that this is out of the way, it's truly ironic to me that Tim isn't even hiding it anymore, that he's basically a man of the left. The guy calls himself a never-Trump Republican, while in conservative circles, they prefer to call him Rhino or Republican in name only, and I wouldn't fault you for thinking that way, given the vitriol you see coming from him even against Steven Crowder for some reason, and then Tim has the gall to call out Trump when he's a mere reflection of what he hates. I think the fact that Steven Crowder wasn't afraid to hold the mirror to him is the perfect segue to show you the kind of demonization of the Republican base on the leftist outlets that people have just kind of grown used to. But watch Steven's satisfying response that left Tim Miller no place to hide.
Every single example that was just given was not addressed to the American people at large, and not even the Democrat voting base at large. America is for Americans. Are Black people not Americans? Are Hispanic Americans not Americans? The qualifier that I have always made, and Donald Trump has always made, and the reason that so many Americans support him is because there aren't those qualifiers of race that we see in identity politics. Every single example, I could go through all of them, the people around Kamala Harris, the people surrounding her are scum and garbage. That's not going to be misinterpreted as Kamala's supporters are garbage. The voters of Donald Trump are deplorable. These people are scum. Kamala Harris is dumb, whatever he said. That's very different from the hatred, the reviling of the American voter, your floor.
Now, I know Biden's infamous garbage insult to Republican voters may have sounded outdated now, given Joe Biden is practically just a relic of American politics at this point, but I want you to take a moment and think about the kind of brewing toxic pot on the left that has even allowed a comment like this to be made about half of the American people in the first place. It started from the basket of deplorables comment from Hillary to MAGA extremists, as Biden called them to this, and I'm not even counting the rabid, violent rhetoric against Trump himself from many members of the media.
Is fight in Congress, fight in the courts, fight in the streets, fight in the streets, fight online, fight at the ballot box.
You get out and you create a crowd, and you push back on them, and you tell them they're not welcome anymore, anywhere.
Their idea is, look, nonviolence hasn't worked, and we are going to try to stop this.
President Walker, how do you resist the temptation to run up and wring her neck?
Other way. That's it right there, pulling it up. Because I'm throwing that piece of shit against the wall till it sticks.
Our democracy is under siege. People need to start taking to the streets. This is a dictator. We need a revolution at this point.
We will, as per Chief Jim Hopper, punch some people in the face.
A spokesperson, the mouthpiece for the President of the United States, to say you don't know me in certain quarters in this nation, that starts a physical fight.
Look as his character is stabbed to death. And there's no mistaking the Trump connection.
My goodness, how long can you keep turning up the heat like this before it spills over? Violent rhetoric is a major problem on both ends of the political spectrum, but the Democratic base needs to realize the fall from grace for their party and the moral high ground it prides itself on. But it seems like they've embraced it instead, while on the other end with Donald Trump, yes, you do find a lot of fiery rhetoric, insults, nicknames, and pejoratives, But the stark difference you see is that what Trump does is very characteristic of populist leaders across the world who are known to be pretty rough and rowdy. They pit the population against notion of an establishment, which is where Trump's idea of the Washington swamp comes from. And even more often than not, even if you find violent or insulting rhetoric from Donald Trump, it's against those party establishments and media figures rather than against half the country's population. But at this point, you'd think it would be easier for someone like Tim Miller to just stop defending the indefensible with Joe Biden, calling half the country garbage, because there is no invisible apostrophe in that sentence that could make it make sense.
Like I said, the only people I called garbage were Donald Trump and Steven Crowder, because they've acted like garbage by disparaging people their entire careers. Like, that was the whole premise of both of these two guys' careers. Donald Trump's just been a little bit more successful at it. So Joe Biden's statement, I think, was like totally nonsensical marble mouth. And I was maybe one of the most vocal people saying Joe Biden shouldn't run for president again. Joe Biden isn't running for president. Kamala Harris is running for president. And she gave a speech on the Ellipse where she talked about how MAGA voters would have and MAGA politicians would have a seat at the table in her administration. So you guys are trying to make something out of nothing, and you're trying to do this fake outrage where it's like in soccer, Piers, where you guys are flopping. You're flopping on the ground, hoping the refs call a foul on Joe Biden, when Donald Trump's whole career has been insults and lies and disparaging people, and also his actual actions have been hurtful. You know, the sexual assault that he committed on women, the fact that he banned people from coming to this country based on their religion, the separating of family. We could just go on and on about Donald Trump's behavior, the cops that got injured at the Capitol because of the riot that he started. So Donald Trump, it's not just his words, it's his actions that have been harmful. And you guys can get mad about what the soon-to-be former president, Joe Biden, like incomprehensibly said, but he's not running against Joe Biden. And it seems like a desperate ploy to like put on a fancy costume and dress up like an Oompa Loompa.
Can he answer a single question without naming Donald Trump? I think Steven Crowder knew here that the conversation wasn't going anywhere anymore. And if you think about it, perhaps that's why some people think Republicans like Tim Miller could really just be controlled opposition to the media, meant to get a reaction and soundbite for it. Steven Crowder was, of course, smart enough to not give it to him, but this conversation was much larger than these two people. Because if you've had the misfortune of spending any time on the leftist media outlet like MSNBC, you start to get a peek into how unabashedly it veers close to calling the Trump-based terrorist adjacent an extremist. That's almost what happened on this MSNBC panel on Morning Joe, when a Democrat pundit literally compared media figures like Jordan Peterson and Joe Rogan to radicalization funnel that brainwash young men just like militant groups do.
Particularly the media ecosystem it's not a good one, it's a negative one, it's a radicalization funnel. But what they have done in their online media ecosystem is build a radicalization engine, literally the way militant groups do around the world, that takes people from relatively low-level annoyances with the world. Why are eggs so expensive? Why is my kid learning this new thing in American history in school that I didn't learn? And then moves them through YouTube videos, through podcasts, moves them from that annoyance all the way slowly to a full-blown fascist politics. It's an elaborate multi-billion-dollar infrastructure, and there is nothing like it on the pro-democracy side. We don't have when a man is just lost and lonely and not yet radicalized, we don't have the equivalent of Joe Rogan and Jordan Peterson to move that man in a feminist direction.
The logical leap you have to take there is enormous, and when they wonder why young men are leaving the Democrats in droves after being derided and invalidated like this, truth is, this is exactly the kind of broad-based targeting of the common people, rather than ideas or the elites that hold them, which was starting to happen a lot more on the left, and it has led to demographics like young men and many minority voters just checking out completely, as we saw in this election. The conversation you saw between Steven Crowder and Tim Miller is just one microcosm of how your cultural conversation has gone terribly off rails. But let me know in the comments if you agree, and share this video across your social media to get the word out. We'll have to wait for the next 4 years and see if this failed strategy is corrected and some semblance of sanity is brought back into our politics.